Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Sparkle, Crackle, Twinkle, Paddle, Waddle, Dazzle, Hobble, Wriggle, Nuzzle. Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Lexitecture. We are so far barely squeaking into the monthly episode category, but we're still here. But in order to do that, you're stuck with me. Once again, as is so often the case, life got in the way. Transatlantic recording sessions were not as easy to come by as we once believed they would be forever. So here we are. However, since I think the last time I did any sort of listener poll, the answer was an episode with half of you is better than no episode with any of you at all. We're going to just do this. So today I'd like to talk about, rather than do, as we normally do when we do solo kind of one-off episodes, they tend to end up being more kind of thematic than focused on a specific word or pair of words. That's going to be the case this time. And I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite little word nuggets in pretty much all of English, and it is the LE suffix. As a committed word nerd, I am a big fan of small, little, tiny things that English does to pack a lot of meaning in. I think it's really interesting how, especially suffixes and prefixes, can do a lot of the heavy lifting of the conveyed meaning of a word in very few letters and usually just one syllable, often a syllable that we forget is even there. As an aside, one of the favorite examples of mine of a small word that packs a lot of punch in English, and it's one that I point to when people talk about how other languages have these, long or complex or deep philosophical concepts encapsulated in a word. Like Schadenfreude is a good one. Or, there's these examples of words that, quote, don't translate into English, which means they don't translate into a single word in English. And one of the cool ones that I like in English is the word lest. I like lest we forget or lest something. And it's like, it's a 4-letter word, one syllable. It means so that it doesn't come to pass that blah, blah, blah. Lest we forget, so that it doesn't come to pass that we forget, so that it doesn't become reality that we forget. Like lest is just a really interesting word. Suffixes are kind of like that. And the LE suffix is especially like that. And I'm a big fan. So, kind of like another one now that I'm on the topic is the suffix just the letter Y. When you get words like spicy or icy, and it's a single letter at the end of the word to tack on to sort of convey the meaning of having the nature of the thing that forms the root of the word. So like ice or like spice, icy, spicy, that kind of thing. It's very cool. I like it. So the LE suffix doesn't have necessarily the same kind of grammatical, concrete function that the Y suffix has, but it's just as cool. There's sort of two ways that it works. It indicates either repetition or some sense of smallness or cuteness or more harmlessness than would otherwise be implicated. So the fancy speak ways, it's either frequentative or diminutive. And a lot of the times these overlap in a lot of the examples. So where do we get this LE suffix? Well, think of words like twinkle, nestle, nuzzle, sparkle, paddle, dazzle, crackle, waddle, giggle. There's loads of them. And in all of these, the main root is a verb by itself, right? You can break it down. It either is a verb still, or it came from a verb at one point earlier in the story of English. And with the addition of the LE at the end, it changes the meaning around, and it does it in kind of what I think is a very cool way. So we'll take sparkle. you think about the difference between spark and sparkle, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, yeah, of course, there's a connection there. You can kind of see it. If something is like a lot of sparks, but over and over again and fairly small, you've got something that sparkles. If you've got, a crackling fire is one that has the onomatopoeic crack noise or effect or, what have you, but over and over and over again. To be dazzled is to be sort of dazed, but in an ongoing kind of way, ongoing, repeated sort of way. And with these things, it's there's still an element of a lessening of, like crack is a very violent thing. A spark is kind of, there's a massive, not massive, but there's a release of energy that could be potentially risky. But if something crackles or sparkles, it's lessened in intensity, but prolonged in frequency. And that's kind of nice. It's sort of made more pleasant. A word like twinkle, so like crackle and sparkle, crack and spark, easy. We have those, we use those, it's great. Twinkle is a little less intuitive, but only because it's in the other category where the root word isn't really a word in English anymore. It's passed into obsolescence, more or less. But when you learn that in olden times, in ye olden times, twink as a verb meant to blink or to wink, it immediately becomes, you get the same sort of aha moment as with spark and sparkle or with crack and crackle. So if you are looking at a light and blinking rapidly, you can immediately see how that light could be said to be sort of a twinkling. Like a twinkling light is one that kind of goes on and off repeatedly. It's got that strobing effect. And it's also another example of how this is inherently diminutive and sort of more pleasant and kind of lessened in potential intensity, because, if you would never talk about, you see those, the stereotypical kind of cliche movie scenes where someone's being interrogated and for some reason there's a really bright light behind a really big fan moving really slowly and nobody ever bothers explaining why or what it's for. But the effect is this kind of strobing, but it's very bright, it's very big, and it's unpleasant. You would never refer to a bright strobing light as being something twinkling, because it just doesn't work, which is an example of how there's that inherent meaning packed into that word that we don't really think about. But then when you parse it out like that, it makes a lot of sense. You go, yeah, well, yeah, of course you wouldn't say this blazing, flashing light is a twinkling light, because there is this diminutive element to the LE suffix in this case. So you get not only an indicator of a repetition and ongoing situation, but also a qualitative analysis of the niceness of the thing as well, which is really neat. Another one that was sort of in the same class as twinkle for me, in that I thought, well, that has to be an exception to this, because the verb to paddle just means to use a paddle, right? So like I thought it was one of these, a noun has been verbed and just happens to have an LE. That's where we get this. It turns out that it's not that simple, which is often the case. And this is probably another example of how the LE suffix is at work. So here we go. Buckle up, because this is a bit of a roundabout route, but we'll get there. Paddles have been around a long time, both as implements and as a noun in English. The earliest citation in the OED goes back to around the year 1400, and it originally referred to a tool. It was basically the same general shape as the end of a paddle that we would think of now, but it had nothing to do with water. It was mainly used to scrape dirt and other assorted stuff off of plows and other agricultural instruments, tools, machines, that kind of thing. So if I had stopped there, I would have said, okay, well, fine. There you go. There's the answer. Paddle meant this, not contraption, this implement. And someone eventually decided to use it in water and thought this would be good for you moving water around and moving us around in water. One thing led to another, and there we go. But again, not so fast, there is more. Because it wasn't until the early 1600s that the OED has any citations for paddle being used to describe the water-based implement. And long before that, the first use of paddle as a verb starts showing up. So you have paddle, the implement. Not long after that, you have paddle as a verb, but they're unrelated at the time. So when the verb starts showing up in written examples in English, the verb paddle meant to wade or walk around in water or around water. And where that came from was the same. It's from the Germanic and Dutch sort of side of the English family tree. And it meant to pad. It's the same root as when you hear someone padding around in bare feet, or, to walk quietly, that kind of thing. To step, basically, but repeatedly in water. So there's where we have to pad, and then pad over and over again, paddle. Only after that did it become relatively common for paddle, the noun, to start referring to the spade-shaped tool used to move a small boat around. And then the verb paddle, to use a paddle to propel yourself through water or over water in a canoe or kayak or whatever. So the sense progression appears to be that there was an implement, a paddle. Pad was a verb meaning to walk or to step. To paddle became to walk or step in, around, near, through water. And that was where that frequentative le suffix comes in, to pad over and over again. And then someone decided to use the verb to do the same thing, to be repeatedly going in and out of the water and being used in the water. And then the noun took that form, that became a paddle, and then to paddle became to use a paddle to get through the water. Now, is that a definitive scientific exploration and lexical thesis? No. However, and I am gonna name drop this because I still get completely geek out about how awesome the incomparable Susie Dent is, because every now and then I can just send the actual Susie Dent a message on Twitter or wherever else and just kind of say, hey, what do you think of this? And she'll actually get back to me, which is weird. But she kind of went, yeah, that makes sense to me. So I'll take it from Dictionary Corner that this is at least a plausible explanation. So paddle is neat. Not miles away, we get, I mentioned to pad was to walk in water or to wade. And again, wade, there's the root, the le suffix, waddle. So a duck waddles because it wades over and over again. The hits just keep on coming with this. It is such a cool thing. And the thing is, the more you start thinking about this, you start noticing it over and over again. Now, is it every time there's an le suffix, it's this le suffix? No. But often it is. And it's just, I like it a lot for the reasons I started out with. It's an example of how English kind of gets short shrift sometimes for not being as comprehensive as a lot of other languages. And it's largely sort of the exoticization of other languages. It's people who have grown up around English, are native speakers of English, have spoken English their whole lives or for much of their lives. And they're kind of going, man, these other languages do this and English doesn't. And the reality is there are super cool things about every language, because language is really neat and English is among them. So this is one of those really cool things. Anyway, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Short and sweet, short and quick episode. The plan is to be back with your regularly scheduled dueling accents, pals from opposite sides of the pond, episodes of Lexitecture going forward. But for now, farewell from this side of the Atlantic, and hopefully we'll talk to you again very soon. And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at Lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.